The scariest part of war is not fighting or dying. The hardest thing about surviving a war is returning home. In this episode, we all meet some people who have done all they can to keep going in the most difficult circumstances. We all tell their stories so that you know you're not alone if you've been through something similar. So let's get started. Woman on fire. Residents of the Syrian city of Aleppo witnessed an incredible scene during the battle for the city between government troops and rebel forces. A woman was walking down the street with her 2 children when a rocket hit her and she burst into flames. Luckily, passers-by rushed to help her. They rolled her on the ground to put out the flames. But even after that, she kept on standing, albeit without her limbs. As it turned out, the woman had lost both legs and arms in the explosion. And then she had to walk half a kilometer to a hospital holding her charred children in her arms. It wasn't just fear or adrenaline that helped her do it. She didn't want to die because she had nowhere else to go. And besides, she knew that there were still many more dangers waiting for her at the hospital. At first, doctors tried to save the woman's life, but the burns covered 80% of her body. There was nothing they could do. They amputated her legs and arms, then placed her in an artificial coma. Soon after, the Syrian gave birth to twins, but she never woke up again. Sasha, from Odessa. When Russia declared war on Ukraine, Sasha decided to stay in her hometown of Odessa instead of fleeing abroad with her family. After all, the girl only had 1 day to make up her mind. When she heard the first explosions that night, she realized that she would never forget them. The next morning, Sasha went to the pharmacy to buy medicine for her elderly mother who had diabetes. And then she found out that all pharmacies were closed. People were already running out of insulin and other essential medications. At the same time, grocery stores were being emptied, and long lines of cars formed at gas stations. Everyone was afraid of a full-scale invasion, so no one wanted to leave town. Over time, the panic subsided, and Sasha returned to work as a kindergarten teacher. But it soon became clear that it wasn't safe to go outside at all. Homes were being destroyed, and people were dying. With each passing day, the girl understood that she would never forget these events. And when the war eventually ended, she would remember how scary it was to see entire families fleeing from missiles, as well as those who stayed behind in the ruins of their homes. Soldier Ivan. After the start of the war, Ukrainians began receiving summonses to report for military service. For someone, this meant leaving their families and loved ones and going to the front line. Many men preferred to flee abroad rather than pick up a weapon. Some were able to get citizenship of another country and avoid mobilization altogether. However, there were also those who chose to stay and fight. One of them was 29-year-old Ivan. He left the capital with his wife and 2 kids just before the invasion. At first, he wanted to take his family somewhere abroad. However, due to the huge influx of refugees, entry was closed. Besides, no one wanted to welcome people from a country at war. Moreover, people began to blame Ukrainian immigrants for the rise in prices and the shortage of basic necessities. At some point, Ivan thought that staying abroad was a waste of time. After all, there was nothing to come back to anyway. He realized that he couldn't live like that forever. So the man returned to Ukraine to join the territorial defense forces. His wife didn't try to dissuade him. On the contrary, she signed him up for the army. Ivan was sent to the east of the country, where he continues to defend his land to this day. His wife and children are now living with her parents, but they will soon be reunited. The man knows that he has no right to give up, not only for himself, but also for his family. When the war ends, he'll be able to return home with honor. A baby in the basement. Iraqi journalist Ahmed al-Rubai was forced to spend 47 days hiding in a basement with her family while U.S.-led coalition aircraft bombed her hometown of Mosul. In an interview with CNN, the woman said she had no choice but to stay. It was a very difficult time for the family. They had to eat, sleep, and relieve themselves in the same room. Plus, the smell from the sewage was incredibly unpleasant. But the main problem was that there was no light or running water in the basement. The locals couldn't even charge their phones, so they had no idea how much longer the bombing would continue. The worst thing was that no one knew where the airstrikes would happen next. In such conditions, it was simply impossible to plan the next day. Also, sometimes the bombing continued for hours. Sometimes it was so loud that the walls were literally shaking. Alem says she felt hopeless at times, but she had no other choice. She couldn't leave her sick father behind. The woman believes that what she experienced was hell on earth, but she survived. And when the bombing finally stopped, she found out that her house had been completely destroyed. Ukrainian grandmother. When Russians invaded Ukraine, many had to flee their homes. Grandparents were among the most vulnerable population. Often they had to be evacuated by force because no one wanted them to stay in dangerous cities. But there was one grandmother who refused to leave her home. Her name was Katerina, and she was from Kharkiv. When the shelling began, Catherine's relatives came to her house and tried to convince her to go somewhere else. But the woman was adamant. She refused to leave her home, although she had practically no one to take care of her. All of her children had already moved to other cities. Katerina was left alone in the village of Chernivtsi, and when the supply of groceries in her house ran out, she had to leave. Locals brought her food and water, but she still couldn't live there. So they took her to a shelter for internally displaced persons. But after a few days, Catherine got homesick and asked to return her. The old woman died just 5 days later. Yana from Kurdistan. Like many other Syrian women, Yana is forced to marry someone she doesn't love. Her new husband was a fighter of the People's Protection Forces of Kurdistan. It's an armed Kurdish group that opposes both Bashar al-Assad and the Islamic State. After the wedding, the girl was taken to the front line, which is actually an ordinary neighborhood in a big city. But there is heavy fighting here. Yana's husband went to attack the enemy, and she had to follow him. The couple settled in a building with several families who also had to leave their homes due to the war. Yanas's husband was killed in an airstrike along with several other militants. Now she lives with her mother-in-law and children, waiting for her turn to get married again. According to local custom, a widow must marry one of her husband's brothers. If she refuses, she may be accused of being immoral and will no longer be accepted in society. This is a law that has existed in Kurdistan for many centuries, but despite its injustice, Yana sees no other way out. After all, she has no one else to rely on, and she can't even imagine what her life would be like if she disobeyed tradition. What kind of person are you? You think you could survive in such conditions? Tell us about yourself in the comments. Here's all for today. See you soon. Bye.